This sculpture that I mentioned earlier is sort of sitting right over here. So a few years after the park was built, I want to say maybe 2 or 3, a biology student by the name of Allison Wade she did a senior report on whether the park was indeed effective at cleansing the water in the park. And we were given a copy of this report. And it's interesting to read. It really, in many ways, it's doing exactly what we predicted it would, what the design team predicted it would. We thought that the estimate was that the water, once it left the park, would be cleansed of about 80% of the bad stuff it had coming in. And we're not too far off of that in many of these. The first thing she looked at was nitrate concentrations. And on average, they were reduced by about 68%. So she's taking samples of water upstream of the park and testing it, and then testing it in a number of different locations throughout the park, and then using averages. Soluble reactive phosphorus is something else that's tested for frequently in this kind of evaluation, and that was reduced by almost 76%. Ammonia decreased by 34%. Suspended solids. Just the stuff in water, sort of floating around in water, all the nasty things that come in as non-point source pollutants was decreased by 64%. And fecal coliform bacteria decreased by 67% to 90%, but it depended a lot on the amount of rainfall. During really significant storm events, she actually found that it increased, which was interesting to note. She believed in her report that it may have to do with people are walking dogs in the park, letting their dogs go to the bathroom in the park, and when the rain really comes down, the side slopes, it's washing all that stuff down in there. Where lighter rains, that wasn't happening. So the good news is, though, that all of these levels are pretty significantly below where the EPA mandates that they need to be, and where a sort of mechanical kind of a system would get them to. The last couple of images are just things that we have worked on here in town, and I mentioned coming back and pardon me, talking to Clark Dietz about these ideas and talking to the city, and we got the go-ahead from the city to explore some things. There wasn't a commitment made necessarily, but there was a curiosity about, well, how might it work, or what might it look like, and so forth. And so this is the intersection of Columbia and Neal, and shows a number of the things that were sort of thought about at the time relative to how these corners could become more pedestrian friendly. And we just we saw opportunities, perhaps at the northwest corner and perhaps at the southeast corner, to maybe take these areas that would otherwise be, just planters at grade with some decorative plant material in them of some kind, and perhaps make those rain gardens. Those were probably the 2 most significant opportunities. But potentially that could happen at some point in the future. These intersection projects are all sort of going to be happening as funding becomes available, I think, right, Roland? This is what we refer to as the Y, but it's where Neal Street and Walnut split, just south of us here. We saw another opportunity here to maybe take that island that I think really goes to about there right now, and extend it down a little further, capture some more space that really isn't necessary for vehicular use. And I believe this narrows the travel lane area a little bit, but the idea is to grab maybe a pretty sizable median here, and create a rain garden out of that. And again, kind of a gateway element. You're sort of leaving downtown at this point, but it could be a very nice way to do that. This little existing historic building out there we imagined as a coffee shop or something like that. But the idea of being able to maybe go out there and spend some time in a little plaza and be adjacent to this amenity felt very similar to a lot of the kinds of things that Portland had done. So just to give you a sense of where that all went here locally. So that's the bulk of the presentation. As Patsy said, I'm happy to take any questions and entertain some discussion. hopefully there were some informative things that you saw. I think you're going to hand this out.
Hi, my name is Jessie Curlow. I actually have, I guess, probably a few more technical type questions. In any of the cities that you've heard of doing these rain garden projects, Portland and your stuff in Bloomington, I don't think is as applicable. But has there been any problems with soil settling and disrupting when they put in the ones that are right next to the roads? Regular rain gardens, a lot of times are in the yards and stuff, so you're not really looking for that kind of thing, and it's not as a major factor.
Right.
But as we've been having discussions with different people in the neighborhood, when I've been asked the question, that's something that's kind of been in the back of my mind is, if we put these in, is there going to be any disruption to along the side of the road or into the sidewalks, kind of coming down as you get the soil settling, or you get, if you happen to not see that you have like a sand vein down there from construction, and all of a sudden, you're getting, major outflow going.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the road is sinking, then people are yelling at you.
Yeah, so some subsidence or something at the edge of the roadway and having failure at the edge. The best of my knowledge, that hasn't been a problem in Portland, and they appear to have the most experience with it. Although, again, if you go to that Bureau of Environmental Services website, their stormwater manual has a whole number of details, the way they handle those edge conditions. And I noticed, because Roland, you asked about that when we talked about this last year. I remember you said, well, does water tend to get underneath that pavement section and cause freezing and thawing and heaving and so forth? And one of the things on their details caught my eye, which is looked like a membrane that they were placing along the edge of the rain garden, which looked like it was intended to separate, keep water from traveling towards the road. So that may be how they're dealing with that. If they did have a problem with it, they may have, started using that membrane.
Down to a certain footing, right?
Yeah, down
and
a couple of feet or
need,
something.
You would need to increase it.
Yeah.
So my other question is, do they happen to explain what the reasoning is for putting in the organic matter? My assumption would be is that the soil over there is probably, I could probably tell you for a fact that it's got to be much lower than the organic matter in our soils here in Illinois. Did they say what their reasoning was for that? Was that for the nutrient collection? Because I know organic matter will help with, pulling out the nitrates and a lot of those other things that will help collect up those things. In which case, would it be as applicable here in Illinois for us to put in the mulch and the compost, because we generally have very high organic matter in our soils?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know specifically, but I would guess that, since a lot of the soils on the east side of Portland are so sort of sandy, gravelly, and percolate so easily, that they may have felt like, in order for the plants to do well, that they're going to need a little bit more organic matter to survive. Yeah, Roland?
We do have good organic soil here in Illinois. It's breadbasket to the world. But when we build streets, we try to make sure that none of that organic soil is underneath the street.
Yeah.
It's compacted clay or rock or something like that. So I don't think you'd find the organic soil that you're talking about right underneath the street. It might be in the parkway, but not under the street. So you would need to dig that out and amend the soil.
In a recent conversation I had with one of the project managers in Portland, he mentioned that Seattle, apparently on their standard mixes, don't use any organic matter at all. It's basically sand and topsoil. So it does appear that it just varies depending on what your local ecology is.
Yeah, in Virginia, I had read a paper that was talking about using trees to help increase the penetration depth of the water, and they were using special soils and stuff, but it didn't have an organic component to it either. That's kind of why I was just curious what the reasoning was for that. So I got just two more.
Sure.
Two more. What was the depth of the chambers, the separate chambers that you made for the wetland in Bloomington, or the water feature in Bloomington? I'm just curious because it looked like they were fairly open water systems.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking that they're over 6 foot, but I was just curious because it didn't look like there was much vegetation on either side.
Right. So the depth of the water in the chambers?